Hello, good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Keenest. I'm with the U.S. Institute of Peace. It is a great honor to join you today. As an institution created by Congress 29 years ago, the Institute of Peace works to prevent, mitigate, and resolve international conflict through nonviolent means. Promoting peace and security for women in Africa is an integral part of our work every day on the ground and here in Washington. It is my great honor to introduce to you the Honorable Congresswoman Edie Bernice Johnson, who will begin.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. And good afternoon to everyone. I'm fully aware that many people are downstairs trying to get through security. But excuse my voice, but I thought that we might go ahead and begin. I want to thank everyone for coming to be a part of this discussion. Thank you. Just put it right here. It is, actually, let me explain that my voice is not from the lack of water. It actually is because I have a nerve damage to my vocal cords that came from spine surgery. And so sometimes I don't have a voice at all, and other times I'm not sure what it's going to sound like. But I try not to let it stop me. But I want to say welcome to all of you, and also welcome to my colleagues. We have Congresswoman Bass, who is co-sponsoring this, but we also have the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus here. If you just stand, Marsha Fudge. And most of you will know Barbara Lee, who is a world traveler, former chair of the CBC. I'm delighted they're here, and there might be others, and if you wish to have a word, you may. The purpose, of course, of this dialogue is to facilitate conversation between members of Congress and other leaders in women peace issues around the world. As you know, the program that I started, the World of Women for World Peace, was in 2001. And I began my initiative because of seeing the cover of a Newsweek magazine after 9/11. 9/11 struck me, but within a month, there was a cover on the Newsweek magazine with two African kids, 14 and 12, all dressed in military garb with machine guns in their hands. And I thought, we've got to do something to spread the culture of peace in the world. And so I didn't know what to do, because you never know when you're going to get to the end of where you're going when you're trying to create a culture. So I decided to start dialogue, and I've tried to take it around the world, and especially attracting women, because I'm convinced that it will be the women who lead the world in peace endeavors. I'm also convinced that no woman gives birth to a child with the idea that when that child gets 14 or 16 years old, they're going to go into war to kill somebody else's mother's children. And so I think that when we are included in the dialogue around the world, we'll begin to see a difference. And it doesn't exclude men. I want to make that clear. It does not exclude men, but the focus on women is because we know as mothers, the hardest thing to experience is to see a child leave home and go to war. As a matter of fact, Mother's Day grew out of that same feeling after the Civil War, when mothers of the South decided they did not want to see their sons get killed in war anymore, and out of that grew Mother's Day. So I've always believed in bringing many women as we can together, and perspectives of people who are interested in spreading a culture of peace around the world. Most of you know that I have used the curriculum that was developed in The Hague and supervised by the UN with those points. And so over the years, I've hosted conferences, briefings, workshops here on the Hill in Dallas, Texas, my home district, as well as many countries, because I'm convinced that it's going to be people like us that's going to spread this word around the world. And as policymakers, we try to use every opportunity we can to work along with other women. And today we're going to focus on Africa and African women. I've been to many, many countries in Africa, and I've never been to a single one that I saw where women were disinterested in leadership or in peace. And I believe that they have a perspective. I know that there are many challenges that face them and face us, as all of us in the Congressional Black Caucus keep Africa in the forefront of our mind, as we know that that is our motherland. And so I want to not spend a lot of time doing a lot of talking, but to get the dialogue started, I'm going to welcome my colleague Karen Bass, who is the ranking member on the Subcommittee of Africa and has agreed today to be my co-host. Karen.
Well, first of all, let me thank Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, who always has a voice. She always has a voice in our caucus, no matter how it might sound. She's a very powerful member that I'm really happy to serve with. And I want to thank you for putting on this forum today. And I think one of the things that I'm very excited about in being in Congress is the ability to work with other great women leaders. Congresswoman Marcia Fudge was just here, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who has been a leader for a long time and I claim as a mentor. We have the leadership here in the House to get things done, and I'm excited to work with them and really appreciate you for putting on this forum today. I'm just back from a visit to the continent. Actually, I just got back yesterday. I went to Mali and met with women who were displaced because of the war. We were in Soweto and visited a clinic that has really benefited by PEPFAR, and we want to make sure that our country's contribution to PEPFAR continues. And I was also in the DRC, and I happened to be in the DRC the day that the agreement was going to be signed. But all that has taken place against women, the violence against women in the DRC, is one of the tragedies in the world. And so I am hopeful, and I will be hopeful about the agreement. I realize that that's just the first step. But in terms of the impact that conflict has had with women in that nation is certainly something that causes all of us around the world great pain. Serving on the Subcommittee on Africa, I look forward to making sure that this year we address women's issues. And one issue that I want to see us address is the issue of maternal death around the world and the need for women to be able to control reproduction to address that. That is a condition that is just absolutely unacceptable in the 21st century, and is certainly something that is extremely rare in our country, and it should be extremely rare around the world. So thank you for inviting me to co-host with you, and thank you again for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you both, Congresswomen Johnson and Congresswoman Bass. We have a tall order in front of us. What a remarkable panel of experts, and we want to hear from each of you and really allow time for dialogue. We have about a little over an hour, so I will ask each of the panelists to keep your remarks brief, to the point. We've asked you in advance if you would address two questions. The first, when you meet with women leaders and activists in these conflict countries in Africa, what do the women say? What are their needs, and what are their ideas for ending conflict? And the second round of questions, we'll go through the first one. We'll give you each a moment to introduce yourselves and give us a little context about what you do and what you're doing to address these concerns. The second question is, what suggestions do you have for members of Congress seeking to help the women of conflict countries in Africa? So I think that is going to be plenty of conversation right there. And what I would like to do is I'm going to work it from the center. I'm going to ask Assistant Secretary Carson to begin our comments, and then Ms. Bangura, and I'm going to go back and forth, if you will. And I will very briefly introduce each of our speakers, but their bios are on a handout. I hope you can read further, but Ambassador Johnny Carson was sworn in as Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of African Affairs in May of 2009. Ambassador, please.
Let me say thank you very, very much to our co-hosts this afternoon, Congresswoman Johnson and Congresswoman Bass. This is a particularly important subject for anyone who works in Africa, and I am delighted to be here as a part of this panel. I will respond very quickly to the question that you raised, and that is, what do women and women leaders say to me when I am in Africa about their condition? And the first thing they ask in many parts of the world and across Africa is, why is a woman always the very first victim in a conflict? Why are women so frequently abused? Why are children so frequently abused? Why don't we have a voice in helping to resolve the many conflicts that beset our country? Why don't people listen to our political voices? Women also ask frequently, why do we have so little engagement and involvement in making the major economic and financial decisions of our countries, especially when we as women contribute so much to the vitality and the economies of those countries? Those are the voices, and those are the questions that we hear. I won't do it now, but hopefully I'll come back to it. But say that those two questions have generated the response that we have made in the Department of State to women's needs. We have taken very seriously the implementation of the U.S. National Action Plan for Women's Peace and Security. We've funded it, and we've attempted effectively to implement it. We have also established a African women's entrepreneurial program to give voice to the entrepreneurial and business spirit of women across Africa, and to help them to enhance and to improve their business and commercial skills. Those are two responses, but I'll stop right there and we'll go into it later. But thank you. I'm extraordinarily pleased to be here.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for both giving us context on the ground and context at the Department of State. We appreciate that. I now have the privilege as well to introduce Ms. Zainab Hawa Bangura of Sierra Leone. She assumed her position as Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict at the level of Undersecretary General on September 4th, 2012. We welcome you back to Washington, Ms. Bangura.
Is it on? Okay.
Yes,
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Excellencies, distinguished members of Congress, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to join this discussion on sexual violence in conflict, which has been called the world's greatest silence. Together we can and must break that silence. I wish to give credit and thanks to the United States for being a resolute and steadfast champion of this cause. The three Security Council resolutions, 820, 1820, 1888, and 1960, that the U.S. has sponsored have finally set us on a path to prevention. They affirm They affirm unequivocally that sexual violence in conflict is a fundamental international peace and security issue, which requires an operational security response. These resolutions establish the mandates with which I have been charged, as well as a team of experts on the rule of law and sexual violence to support national governments to address this issue. Through Resolution 1960, we have new and sharp-edged tools to enforce compliance, to begin to shift the stigma of sexual violence from the victims to the perpetrators. This focus on breaking impunity is one of my central priorities and is a critical aspect of deterrence and prevention. In my role, I serve as a voice and a global advocate for women, children, and men who are the victims of sexual violence in conflict. My office coordinates UN and global efforts and leads the international response. My role is also to mobilize political leadership to address this issue, and I place particular emphasis on national ownership, leadership, and responsibility. This is not only a UN issue. It is a primary and moral legal responsibility of countries to protect their citizens. Therefore, they must lead this fight, and the UN will be here to support them. At the same time, we must empower women as the front line of protection and ensure adequate health care and other support to victims and survivors. These are our collective priorities and our collective responsibilities. I believe that this is the great moral issue of our time, and that together we can eradicate this scourge. We produce a report annually. Our report is going to come out on the 15th of March. This year's report, which we call the Secretary General Report, covers 22 situations of concern: conflict, post-conflict, and situation of political strife. We are increasingly seeing sexual violence as part of the rapporteurs of violence in conflict situations and in the context of contested elections such as seen in Kenya, Guinea, and Cote d'Ivoire, and in the context of political strife in Egypt, Libya, and Syria. Sexual violence remains vastly underreported, but we are beginning to better understand the phenomenon and some of the key related thematic issues. The Secretary General's report coming out on the 15th of March, for instance, addresses issues such as sexual violence used to force displacement and refugees. 2, nexus between sexual violence and illicit exploitation of natural resources and drug trafficking. 3, forced marriage by armed groups. 4, critical need to factor sexual violence in security sector reforms and disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration processes. 5, children born out of rape. 6, and the tremendous risks for survivors, families, NGOs, and journalists to report. In response, the Security Council has shown a willingness to bring all its tools to bear on perpetrators. Example, in the DRC, Sanction Committee designating the M23 and a number of individuals for sanction for sexual violence. And last but not the least, the International Criminal Court, now focusing in all its indictments on sexual violence, sends an important signal for us that if you commit the crime, we'll go for you. We'll get you, we'll try you, we'll prosecute you, and we'll lock you up in jail. And there will be no hiding place for you in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mangura, and for bringing perspectives at the international and, of course, at the very grassroots, the dilemmas in terms of sexual violence that we're addressing here today. I'd like to introduce Ambassador of the Republic of the South Sudan, Dr. Akik Kok. Please join us.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And I want to add my voice to earlier speakers to thank the hosts, Congresswomen Johnson and Bass. It is a great occasion for me to make these few comments. In South Sudan, we have been in conflict for quite a long time before our independence, and it has led our women to develop skills and responses which are very much in line with what is being done today. Let me take, for example, in 1991, when we split into two groups, it was the women that brought the two parties together for dialogue and for restoration of one organic group so that we could negotiate very well with the center as a united body. It was not possible for us to negotiate as two bodies. The Sudanese women came together and went to Berlin, to Peking, again in 1992-3, and their voice was very strong, calling for an end to conflict, because on both sides, whether the child dies on the Sudanese side or on the South Sudanese side, the women were affected with their maternal instinct. So they always suggest that we have to stop conflict. And by calling elders from non-warring communities to mediate, and including elders from the fighting communities, so that once a decision is taken, it can be easily implemented, so that they are part of the process. As the Honorable Undersecretary General said, women are victims of violence when they undertake some normal household duties, like getting to collect firewood. Because they are not armed, they are raped, they are taken prisoner, or they are killed. And the greatest loss is when women diminish in the society. We are working very hard to see to it that our women are empowered in a very great manner. We have a policy of 25% minimum representation in any of the national institutions, but they can also compete for the other seats within the 75%. I know they have a lot of power, they have generated a lot of ideas. We are thankful to our women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for giving us that view of the day-to-day dilemmas in South Sudan, and also the ways in which you are trying to bring opportunity in the political sphere for women to become more engaged and a part of the peace processes. Thank you. I would like to also take a moment here and recognize Representative Hank Johnson, who just joined us. Thank you, Representative. We now turn to looking at the area of our bilateral policy makers and, of course, critical players in the world with the World Bank. Marcela Gigali is the Director for Poverty Reduction and Economic Management, otherwise known as PRAM, for the Africa region. Please.
Thank you very much, and I also add my gratitude to the two Congresswomen for the kind invitation on my behalf, certainly on behalf of the World Bank. I subscribe and associate myself with the comments that have already been made in regards to the reality that African women, particularly those living in fragile and conflict states, are living every day. And I would only try to add at the margin what keeps surprising us when we listen and hear the messages coming from these women. And I want to mention three areas that are in a way guiding the work, both financial and analytical, that my colleagues and myself are doing at the bank. The first message, which to me is not just a sign of leadership, but a sign of development, is African women want to be leaders in the integration of Africa with itself. I'm sure you know Africa has been a success in globalizing itself, in selling its commodities to the rest of the world. It's perhaps one of the most integrated, globally speaking, continents in the planet. But it has been a failure in integrating with itself. Trading within Africa is almost nil. Even across countries that are supposed to have custom unions, where goods, services, and people and money are supposed to flow with no interruption. So we did quite a bit of work in the Great Lakes area, particularly Eastern Congo and the cross-border areas with Rwanda. Why? Because that's where farm products show the highest differential in price. Your eggs in Congo are worth 10% of what they are worth in Rwanda. So it is poor African female farmers that are trying to bring their produce across borders. And we have documented both in writing, but also we have filmed the fate of women that every week try to cross that border with their eggs or with their farm products. And we have calculated that the probability of them being either physically or sexually abused is about 50% each time. So if you cross every week for 20 years, something is bound to happen to you. Now you can replicate that pretty much all over Africa, including the Sahel. We find some of this integration within the continent the answer to much of the violence we see at the moment, particularly violence against women. So that's an area where, again, we can hit three agendas at the same time. It's poverty, it's food security, and it's gender. The second area which I would think women are teaching us to push the envelope is in using women's voice to accelerate accountability in service delivery. And I think I can explain this with a simple example. We gave Nigerian women in the state of Rivers cell phones the moment they are found to be pregnant. And they can text and be texted every time they had to interact with the doctor. But more importantly, we say, here is a particular text that you can send if somebody asks for money to give you the service. So it's a way to chase corruption. And we took a baseline and compared it with a year later, and indeed we practically wiped out, or the state of Rivers did, wiped out corruption in everything that has to do with birth and early childhood development, because women now have a voice that is expressed through ICT technology. The same can be replicated everywhere. Tanzania for teacher absenteeism is one case in point, where you can also see these kind of examples. And Rwanda is more and more going that way. And finally, another area where I think we can push the envelope is in literally listening to women. They can provide the evidence that will back the principle. Until now, we were very eager to bring this agenda forward on the basis of ethics. And it's a good basis, but it really carries a lot of additional water if we bring rigorous evidence. So we established several programs of impact evaluation, that's a technical lingo for it, to determine, for example, what happens to farm investment when women are trained and are given title to their land. And what we found is that both productivity and investment in that particular plot doubles compared to when the title of the land and the training is given to men. The same thing is when we train, or intervene as we call it, in giving mentoring services to young women or adolescent girls in Rwanda. Their chances to find a job, even a salary job, meaning a job with a formal boss, doubles. And it's an intervention that is particularly inexpensive if you think about it, because it's collective in nature. So these are three examples of the type of things we hear. There are many more, and I will be happy to share them with you as the panel moves on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you putting the role of economic empowerment on the table in this discussion. It's critical, but also recognizing the risk inherent in that kind of empowerment process, and also the great examples in terms of poverty, food security, and gender, and looking at that nexus. I want to turn now to our colleague Nancy Lindberg, who is the USAID Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance. And Thank you so much. I was going to bring you my microphone, but I think that will work. All right, thanks very much, Nancy.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. And again, I add my thanks to Congresswoman Johnson and Bass for convening us today. My bureau at USAID really puts a lot of my time at the nexus of these issues of USAID democracy, conflict, and humanitarian assistance. And I've had a chance to talk to a lot of women in a lot of conflict countries, from Somalia to Sudan to Mali, just in the last few months. And what do they say? I think without exception, women want security so that they are able to travel without being subjected to violence. They want the ability to support their families with dignity, and they want a voice. And so we have at USAID, in partnership with our State Department colleagues, really embraced the National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security, and that, coupled with a USAID strategic framework, have really formed the backbone of how we are putting women at the center of an agenda that encompasses economic opportunities, protection, and raising up their voices through participation in the political process. We understand that, especially in places where you have protracted humanitarian crisis, that it's critical to work with women to push forward that resilience to repeated crisis, and to enable women to have access to negotiations, to political participation, both as candidates and as voters. We've established a $2.6 million Global Women's Leadership Fund, which is working with women in Cote d'Ivoire, with women in Sudan, to enable them to have access to the kind of political training, to the kind of negotiation training that enables them to really have that voice at the table. I would also note that the Feed the Future initiative introduced by President Obama has at its heart understanding the need to increase economic opportunities specifically for rural Africa that depends on agriculture. And as we know, the majority of African farmers are women. And so it does become this nexus of issues that enable a development agenda to go forward. We know that not a single conflict-affected country is on track to meet the Millennium Development Goals. And so to move forward that development agenda, it is critical to engage women as participants, as peacemakers, and as part of the economic fabric that can move from conflict to the kind of future that's envisioned in the Millennium Development Goals.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you for reminding us again about the U.S. National Action Plan and the role it's playing within our government to help put these issues of women, peace, and security forward. It reflects the long, hard work that went into the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 that really focuses on the engagement of women in peace and security issues. Well, what does peace and security look like? Hawa Saleh, who is here as a part of Voices for Sudan, but who was here a year ago to receive one of the International Women of Courage Awards. Please talk to us about what is happening in Darfur and other places around that region.
Thank you, all of you. You are welcome. And Kathleen, thank you so much for organizing this table discussion. And thank you so much for Congressmen. Really, today is, I think, is a very great day for me. And I hope from today, tomorrow, all of you pray with me. Tomorrow is 27 February. It's the same date my village was attacked. And I become as a refugee, and I lost 100 members of my family. Tomorrow is 10 years genocide ongoing. So all of you, I'm today really very honored to be with you here. and to let you to cry with me tomorrow. All of you, especially two congressmen and the other congressmen whom their voice is very powerful, and we are very appreciate that. I was meet last December with the office of the Congress Catherine Bess, her office, and we let our message about the situation in Sudan. I'm from Darfur, and really since March up to now, I'm going to educate the people in the United States of America, especially all institutions, officially, and students, and everybody to get action. Those women, they're civilian women and children, they're dying every day. So in the terms of humanitarian situation, really the situation, not just in Darfur, 10 years genocide going on, but now it's moving to other area in South, in the Blue Nile and South Kordofan and Nuba Mountains. And this is a situation in Sudan, really so serious situation. And sometimes very sad. I'm telling that I'm coming from Sudan. Never, 50 years, the generation, never seen peace. And we are so appreciate also the ambassador of South Sudan. Now they're separated from Sudan. We are very sad that they was in part of Sudan and they was now separated as their own country. We appreciate the women and the children and the generation whom they lost the future. They get their hope again to go recreate it again, new generation hope. And at the moment, really, this is a very wonderful moment. All of us here, in the terms of the women's, to get actions, every woman have to have a voice. And thank you most of all of you to get women voice out, everybody to hear women. She has human being and she have rights to involve all the life levels, politically, socially, economically. Her voice have to come out and to be strong. And for this, we are now, yes, what I know that I'm coming from the community, is very difficult, the women voice to come out. It's not easy. And according to traditional customs and the bad understanding to the people of the religious, I was now front of youth, but I'm not believe that I'm alive. 3 times I was arrested because of women advocacy. And 2 times I was being kidnapped, but I not believe that I'm alive up to now. The last time my arrested becomes international figure, and I since never seen before the congressman in Pennsylvania. They look in my case for my release, and then they transferred it from my release to State Department. Hillary Clinton and Susan Rice, they signed about my release. I'm very honored that I'm alive. And so this is for women's rights. So to me, become a sentences as a death. This is just example. This is more women-like. But the life of the women now, the difficulty and the challenges women are facing in order to come out, many crimes. One of the crimes is a rape, is against humanity, and internationally is a very figure crimes, but as a tale of the women, especially in Darfur, it become normal. Now rape is normal. Every weekend we have 3, 4, 7 women they rape it. Every 3 days we have 2 women, 3 who was kidnapped and killed and arrested. So this is police. This is really crimes. I'm here today to everyone to involve in the terms of women to be safe. I was 9 years in the camps as a refugee camp since 2003, 27 February. I lived it how the life inside the refugee camps, how the life look like, what the difficulty the women face in order to be alive. This is I'm already left it, and I know that how is very difficult. And this is but encourage me to come out, to fight behind of the women to have freedoms, to have their rights, equality in the men. I'm ready for the moment to fight among the men in the equal rights. So this is now we are fighting, women have equal rights. Most of the times I live in Darfur, these 9 years and the life in the camps, I visit more than 50 refugee camps. These 50 refugee camps, most of the women and the young lady, they explain what your needs. They say we need peace, we need justice, we need equal rights, we need freedoms to come out to speak. Everybody to know what we have feel. We need the work, we need educations, we need health service. So this is what they don't have it and they call it to have. So I hope from today, and there is a many international revolution in the term of protection in Darfur especially, and the many areas of Sudan. But there is also many peace agreement was signed and many negotiations was signed in the attempt to bring peace and justice in Darfur or in Sudan. But Sudan government failed to bring all of this and failed to implement all this peace and justice too. So I'm here today really and very appreciate that to share with you. This is just example and I'm the witness in the life of the camps Hawas. And many of the people border across the country to other country. I was never seen it. I wrote many books. In the books of the people there was happening genocide in Rwanda, in Congo, in Sierra Leone, but never seen the suffering like what's happening in Darfur. Never.
Thank you, Ms. Sile.
Thank you so much, all of you, and really the time for to get action. I invite all of you, we have 10 of March rally in front of White House here, and all of us join us to call protection and deliver humanitarian to all people who need it in Sudan. And this is good opportunity to all of you, especially I invited 2 congressmen and 2 congresswomen, and I will be very appreciate to hear their voice there. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you for your voice, and thank you for sharing your own personal story. It brings it very much close to heart. We know that civil society is a key player in all of these processes and changes underway, and it's happy to invite Ashraf Khan, who is the new Chief Executive Officer for Women International. She's been in that position since last June, and we're grateful that you could join us here this afternoon.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Congresswoman Johnson and Bass, for organizing this hearing. I think it's unique in the sense that it brings together both policy actors, people on the ground, activists, and people working in the administration, all of which help to lend voice, agency, and participation to women's issues throughout the continent. I'll just give one brief overview on Women for Women International, and then try and answer 2 of the questions that were asked.
Actually, we're just going one round
okay.
first, the questions.
So I think on the questions then, I think the approach to those questions is pretty much grounded in the work that Women for Women does, and partly because we deal with women in an integrated way. Women are well, they're economically empowered, they know their rights, and they form social networks. When we speak to women, the more than 380,000 that have been enrolled in the Women for Women program, I recognize that 2 points come out very clearly. Greater involvement of women and bringing women into the decision-making processes around peace, and very clearly that's lending women an opportunity to have a voice in a more inclusive way. So including women in implementing bodies and supporting local organizations and women's networks, 2 crucial pieces. The second is, I think, recognizing that women need greater assistance becoming economically self-sufficient so they can support themselves and their families. It's going beyond just to thrive, just to survive, to look at the opportunities to thrive. And in that sense, it's a crucial element of economic empowerment, allowing women the space to join those processes. of peace and building peace in their communities. And thirdly, that the engagement of men as being a crucial point around women's security, both during and after conflict. I think violence against women is not an inevitable part of that conflict, and those who perpetrate violence need to be held accountable, but also at the grassroots level, knowledge of women's rights, and we have a men's leadership program that has focused on training more than 2,000 male community leaders in Nigeria since 2002, and more than 1,000 male leaders in Congo, is an important part of creating a community support for women's rights. Then with respect to the question around women's safety, I do think addressing impunity is crucial, but I also think that supporting networks of women at the community level is a critical element of women recognizing, knowing their own rights, and forming groups to speak up about those rights. And you have a number of organizations that are based in the US, but also African-based organizations that are crucial to not only speaking out at the international level, but speaking at the community level, and building support for those is key. With respect for suggestions for members of Congress seeking...
That's where we're going to go a second round.
Fine, I'll stop there then. And just my last point, I think, will just be that I think partly the frameworks that have been set, whether it's Security Council Resolution 1325 or 1820, 1888, and 1960, these are important international elements. I think more and more building up national capacity and national plans of action to address peace and security on the ground in countries in Africa is an important way of helping sustain, localize, and create, in a way, a national capacity to address those issues in the context of those countries where there's a clear differentiation and different set of agendas that need to be addressed, whether it's Congo, whether it's Rwanda, whether it's South Sudan, or the current conflicts in Mali. I think a national process that allows for engagement, full inclusion, participation of women. And I think we should all be proud that 2 of last year's Nobel Peace Prize winners were African women who had helped lead that peace process. So we have successful models in Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and Lema Gabawi about how that change can be effected at the highest levels. And now is the time to invest in the grassroots ability to mobilize support.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing forward some new ideas to the discussion here, the engagement of men, that it is critical to have male champions who understand that this is a critical part of the process of peace, and certainly looking at national capacity. And I think that Ms. Bangura has been talking about that as well in some of her recent comments.
So when I visit with women during my research projects, they ask every time the same loud question: who will save my children? We African women, we sleep and we wake up worried about our children. Whether they are Hutu or Tutsi, whether they are from South Sudan or North Sudan, we are mothers, we are just worried about our children and grandchildren. And the suffering of women is the suffering of children. A child left behind without a mother, or a mother who's completely disempowered because she has lost her dignity because of sexual violence or domestic violence, really is the suffering of children. Yes, women are making progress. That's what I have learned through my research projects. They are being more or less involved in projects and programs that give them a voice, but guess what? Their voices are still weak, feeble, and mostly unheard. High school girls are negotiating the rubbles of war in Burundi here, trying to study, to get ahead, doing their laundry, hanging it out, but going to study in under broken windows that endanger their lives. African women are asked to really sacrifice everything for peace, because That's the only choice that we have. But what I hear all the time, that we really need to hear more often, is that promoting peace and security for women is advancing youth's positive engagement in African nations. Because we all are familiar with the problems with youth. That's how Congress Johnson, became interested in the plight of women and youth, looking at the pictures of children who were engaged in combat, 10 or 11 years old. But guess what? If the mothers are stable and they have the means to care for their children, that will stop. These are school children in Sierra Leone. Conflict, war, violence, poverty, and the conscience of the nation and the world community. Empowering African women is empowering current and future generations. We are the heart of the family, but we are also the heart of society. The African woman is the pillar of development. She's the backbone of society. She's the nurturer of love. She's the cradle of humanity, the architect of forgiveness and hope for the future. Now, you are very special to me. This is really a big part of sharing this evening. This is my mother, and this is her voice, asking all of us to lend me a hand, to hear her, hear me, hear my African sisters, daughters, and granddaughters. My name is Angela. I'm a Burundian woman, Umurundikazi. I am the African woman, overworked, abused, wounded, voiceless. Lend me a hand. Restore my dignity, affirm my intelligence, validate my faith, honor and protect my family. Hear me, feel my losses, preserve my strength, uphold my rights, my human rights, stop the violence, labor for peace. Hear me, lend me a hand. Thank you. Murakoze.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you for reminding us about this cycle of violence, that even though conflict may end, violence often continues, and it is often women who are the first to know it directly. We have two more speakers. We have limited time, but I want to make sure everyone has had a voice before we go to the second question about how can Congress help in this regards. Our next speaker is Rebecca Deng. She is here as a part of Voices for Sudan, and she has been looking at and working on trauma healing to women in the Great Lakes region. Please, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really honored, and all of us here, for the invitation from Congresswoman Johnson. Thank you. It means a lot to us as frequent from women from the African continent, whether you are diaspora or living in the continent. It means a lot that our voices can be heard. I am part of the Voices of Sudan, and I am working with this organization called Choose My Sister. It's focusing with women in Great Lake Africa and bringing trauma healing. I believe that all of us are aware what we hear, the causes of everybody that is hearing. These women have experienced the worst that human being can experience. They have been raped, they saw their husband killed, their children. And so as we move forward, I believe in the leadership of the African women and of all the women in general. And these women, I'm a product, I'm alive today because of the great Second Sudanese War. I was raised by women. All of my fathers or uncle and everybody was in war fighting. So I was carried by the women during the war. I was given discipline to live in a refugee camp. And it was a woman again that advocates on behalf of me and others people. So I can say proudly today that I am a former lost girl of Sudan. And I made it to the United States, not because of my strengths, but because of my mothers that let their voices heard about the situation of children in the refugee camp in Kakuma in Ethiopia, in Uganda. And so I'm asking all of us today that we keep thinking of these African women, and we think of them not as victims, but as women with strengths, and that can move things forward. So that will be my one point, because when I meet these women, I was a child when the war happened, but I'm always moved. I went back 2 years ago to southern Blue Nile. I never been there. It was a different tribe than I was brought up, but I was moved by these strengths. They never called me that you are from what? They called me my daughter. That was my name in the little village. And that's what I want us to carry on, that strength of the women. Let's just join us and join them, because the worst that happened to them, and they just need our help to help them identify more of the strength that they are not seeing, to give them training. So thank you so much, and I will talk more in the next question.
Thank you very much, and for bringing forward the importance of transforming one's victimhood into empowerment, and you embody that. Thank you very much for sharing that. I want to recognize Congresswoman Corrine Brown, who joined us this afternoon. Thank you. Our last speaker on the panel, but not the last word, Farah Council is the program manager for the Institute for Inclusive Securities work in South Sudan and Sudan. And she has been leading efforts to advance the inclusion of women in the ongoing peace processes.
Thank
Please,
you.
Farah.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you so much, Congresswomen Bass and Johnson. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for hosting it, and for the other Congress members that are here as well. I am from the Institute for Inclusive Security. Our mission is to promote the participation of women in peace processes. I lead our work in Sudan and South Sudan, and I want to thank Rebecca for segueing so nicely into what I was going to talk about, which is resilience. There's been a lot of discussion about the voices of women and the need for the voices of women to be present, so I appreciate that coming up so repeatedly. Our mandate, again, is participation, so we focus on the participation pillar of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And so what I want to do now is take a moment and give you a bit of a story that's very recent, only in the last few weeks, of women from Sudan and South Sudan coming together to say enough is enough, and this is how we think the peace process should go in between Sudan and South Sudan. Before I say that, I want to just also note that participation is not an important, is this better? Can you hear me? Okay. Participation is not an end in and of itself. It's not about only having women at the table. It's because having more diversity of voices and more inclusive peace process will actually bring issues to the table that are not being discussed, and therefore it will impact security in a positive way. We know that in Sudan and South Sudan, I've been working actively there for 3 years. Every single time I've met with women, and I can't speak for them, but I'll tell you what I've heard, is that insecurity is the #1 issue. And that looks a lot of different ways. But if more women are actually present, as those Congresswomen here know, there are different issues that come to the table, those social issues that are sometimes missed in high-level political discussions. So recently, I'll refer you to a document that you have. It's a one-page communique in your packets if you have them, or from outside. And this is a communique produced by 20 women, 10 from Sudan and 10 from South Sudan, recently in January 2013 at the African Union Summit. We brought 20 women together from both countries for about a total of 12 days to do advocacy around the peace process in Sudan and South Sudan. Some of you may know that in September of 2012, 9 peace agreements were signed, 9, oil, nationality, security, etc., and not one of them has been implemented. The peace process is very stalled. We brought the women together so that we could all learn exactly what was in those agreements, because if you open them and read them, I can guarantee you, you won't know what they mean. So we spent 4 days reading them, meeting with technical experts, educating ourselves, blowing our minds wide open about what they meant and how the parties actually came to those agreements. The women then sat down and deliberated and said, what are our common priorities together? What is our common interest? And what can we as women bring as a value to this peace process? So they produced the one-page communique that you can find outside on the table. It addresses their concerns and priorities. It says things like, we're tired of being afraid. We're tired of the conditionalities imposed on the peace process. Mind you, these are women from 2 countries that have been in conflict for 50 years.
Thank you very much. I think the Congress can continue to play a role of advocating and providing a platform for women's voices to be heard, not only on the Hill, but also in the executive branch and among various constituency communities. Congress can also look at finding ways to encourage creative legislative and policy solutions for issues related to women. Congress can be a mobilizer. It can be a catalyst. It can continue to be a leader. Congress can use its power to generate resources to support programs, and Congress can serve as a leader in bringing both private and public voices together. There is nothing more powerful than a piece of legislation which helps to focus the efforts of the entire U.S. government behind a program. I'll stop there and say that, again, we wanted to applaud the work of Congresswoman Johnson. What she is doing today is leading, is serving as a catalyst, serving as a mobilizer, serving as a convener, all the things that are critical in ensuring that this issue remains at the top of our agenda.
Thank you, Ambassador. So well said, and I can only second, and I know everyone sitting around this room today nodding their heads in full agreement. Thank you, Congresswoman. Ms. Bangura.
Thank you very much. I'll join the Assistant Secretary of State to actually thank Congresswoman Johnson. I think what you're doing is a really fantastic job, and I look forward to continue participating and to work with you very much. My suggestion to Congress is first to continue to provide political support that ensures that measures to combat sexual violence in conflict are mainstream into and tied to aid programs and funding for government combating this problem. Secondly, to continue to advocate for an end to impunity for perpetrators, respect for human rights and women's rights, women's empowerment. 3, to call on governments to account when they do not respect these rights. Governments who do fail, I think we should call them to account. Why do I think the Congress should be interested in this? It's because fighting sexual violence is not just a moral issue or a human rights issue. It is an economic issue, a development issue, a peace and security issue, and a health issue. We know the immense contribution women make in Africa. We have had our colleague talking about it. They represent 70% of the informal economy, produce 80% of the continent's food, and account for nearly 100% of putting that food on the table. So when women are attacked, degraded, and humiliated, economic development is undermined. Imagine for one instance if instead of destroying all this potential, you harness this immense human capital by ensuring that women and girls were not subjected to sexual violence in conflict, had equal access to education, equal levels of political participation, equal economic opportunities, equal participation in peace-building processes, and improve healthcare and reproductive rights. This is the challenge and the choice we are facing today. We can capitalize on the strength of the African woman, or we can waste their potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and certainly we need to look at that harnessing of energy. What an amazing amount of energy lost in the suffering and abuse, and what a shift. And opening up our creative understanding of solving the problem. Ambassador Cook, would you like to share with us some of your suggestions?
Thank you once more. I will add my voice to the appreciation for Congresswoman Johnson, and most of the points have been raised. One suggestion that I want to add is we have seen the potential of our women in Sudan and South Sudan. Long before the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed, they were ahead of it. And they showed us the way. If our women were in leadership, probably today we would still not be in conflict. So would there be a way for the Congress to train, build capacity for these ladies, and particularly some of the members of parliament from the Republic of Sudan and South Sudan? Because when you live in an environment where dialogue is given priority, then you learn to implement it, you learn to apply it better. So I'm suggesting if there would be, I know it is expensive, but if there would be a way to include some time for members of Congress and the leaders who they are today here, would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And dialogue, bringing dialogue, and you said time. It takes time to have a dialogue. It isn't a fast process, and I think those are critical comments in light of what we need to do next. Marcelo?
Thank you very much. Let me perhaps start by saying there is a lot that the U.S. Congress is doing very well vis-a-vis Africa. We need to recognize that. I've been a witness to development for 25 years now, and the level of engagement that this Congress is proposing is, to me, not only welcome, but it's unprecedented. It is providing a sounding board for ideas. It is raising awareness. It is giving a safe platform for stakeholders to speak up, and for those that are beneficiaries of the final process of development to engage and to have a dialogue. So a lot is going on very well. I think we need to, all of us, continue recognizing the enormous change that Africa is experiencing itself, no? Whereby we now move from being donors, as we used to be, to now being partners, from being financiers to being investors, and from being instructors to being advisors. That change in mentality is something that we all had to embrace, and I think the leadership of not just the U.S. Congress, but the U.S. in general, will be critical for that. Tactically speaking, I would also urge that we all consider that food security is not just a reactive crisis situation once in a while when drought or fighting interrupts the flow of food, and we see these children with blunted stomachs in television. Rather, it is an opportunity for development. It is a gender agenda. Food in Africa is a gender agenda. And there is a lot we can progress by just taking that issue proactively, seeing where our investments are going, how we can help women take the leadership in what they are actually doing, but they are not able to exploit, which is to feed their own continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Africa is a gender agenda. I like that, and I think it's something that we have seen here this afternoon. Nancy, would you share some of your thoughts, suggestions for our government and
Yes,
Congress?
thank you. And let me also apologize that I may have to slip out a few moments early,
Understood.
but I want to echo the thanks for what Congress has done and continues to do, first and foremost, supporting the opportunities to engage and support in these kinds of programs in Africa that I think have and continue to make a difference. And I would note that Congress has a unique opportunity of engaging in 3 dimensions. The first is with constituents. To do this kind of panel in your districts is very, very powerful. We know from public opinion polling that the American public has a deep reservoir of support for this kind of engagement, but they don't always have access to the information or understanding how to plug in. And Congress is really well placed to play that kind of leadership role, and I know many of you do, but I would encourage more. The second is here in Washington to continue to support and encourage administration or interagency initiatives like the National Action Plan and continue to hold us accountable for following through on that, for encouraging high-level senior negotiators to always, in various peace dialogues, to always ensure that there are women included in that process. And overseas, the trips that Congress members take, the connections that you make when you go overseas are invaluable, both for providing encouragement, support, building connections, and even sometimes relationships that can be very important in encouraging women's participation in political processes or ensuring that women are included in formal trade processes as countries undergo their development journey.
Say before I leave to thank every person here on the panel and all of you who have attended. This has been extremely helpful to me, and I think it perhaps everyone will understand why we need to keep talking and why we need to keep sharing. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
Thank you
so
very much.
much.
Thank you for
coming.
making this opportunity possible.